Hi, this is Michael Becker, and in this Tinderbox lesson, we're going to demystify action code. This is going to be part one of what I hope to be a series of lessons around helping the Tinderbox community understand action code and all of its nuances. So this part one is going to be focused on terminology, and so we just understand it within the context of Tinderbox. So let's jump right in. So I've got a Tinderbox file open running, and I just want to start with before I dig into this presentation with some acknowledgements. First and foremost, Lou Friedland, one of the Tinderbox community members, reached out to me last week and said, let's try to make this action code a little bit more approachable and easier. And so he and I met a couple of times. We've talked about it and the results of that conversation, and the conversation I've had with many of you over the last few months has resulted in this presentation. I also like to put out a shout out to Mark Anderson, Tom Diaz, Bruce Gale, Mark Bernstein, and pretty much everyone throughout the Tinderbox community that's helped me over the months as I've learned to develop and interact with Tinderbox. So to understand action code, what we want to first do is understand some core concepts of Tinderbox. First, what Tinderbox is, what a node is, and what attributes are. So first and foremost, I have a lot of thoughts about Tinderbox and what it is. For me, Tinderbox is a really powerful personal knowledge management and knowledge sense making tool. What that means is I can use Tinderbox to be able to basically collect a bunch of information and ideas. I can then curate those ideas. I can create new ones, and then I can contribute, aka publish my knowledge. Most of us, when we use Tinderbox, we get stuck in this collection stage. We throw a bunch of notes in there and we just don't know what to do next. Tinderbox is used appropriately can be a really powerful tool to curate those notes, link them, cite them, massage them, add attributes and other kind of metadata associated around with them, and really turn them into these atomic bits of insight that can then lead to more atomic bits of insight, more creation, more knowledge that can lead to further collection as well as to more creation. And then finally, you can take those atomic bits of knowledge and publish them independently or amass them together to create pieces of work. And as I've been interacting with many people throughout the community, there are tons of pieces of work. People are simply collecting notes, but they're also building industry maps and doing time management and project management and teaching classes and authoring articles, books, and scripts and dissertations, and just a whole bunch of really cool work that's being done with Tinderbox as people think about how they go about their own personal approach for creating and managing knowledge and making sense of all of the data that's out there within their lives. A little tip for you on this one is, again, Tinderbox is a great tool for me for managing knowledge. And knowledge management is a highly personal process to which Tinderbox is part of that process. I also use a number of other tools. I use DevonThink and Zotero and TextExpander and Photoshop and Snagit and Camtasia and Firefox and my school's library and the W3C schools resource for HTML. I mean, there's just so many tools that I use for this knowledge management process. But again, just to summarize, for me, Tinderbox is this incredible personal knowledge management and sense-making tool. Now, within Tinderbox, you've got this idea of a note, and I want to spend a second to define what a note is. A note is a discrete, unique collection of attributes or of information, if you will. And we're going to define an attribute in just a second. But this is a note, and a note is combined by collecting attributes. So let's quickly then define what an attribute is. An attribute is essentially a piece of stored value. If it's easier to think about it this way, think about an attribute like a field in a database or a cell in a spreadsheet. It is an item that has information in it. And then that information can be used within Tinderbox for a variety of different ways, and every note within Tinderbox has every attribute associated with it, whether or not that attribute is visible or not. How we go about using the value in those attributes? Well, we can do it to tell Tinderbox what to do, aka execute action code, or perform some action, or perform a query, aka go find me something. We can use Tinderbox to ensure that each node is unique, aka its ID or its path. We can use Tinderbox to give a note its particular character, such as change the shape, the size, the color, its position on a map, or its order in its outline. There's so many different characteristics that we can give to a note. And then we can also use Tinderbox to store value, to store information, to store values. So when you're looking at a particular note, and remember when I said a note is a collection of attributes. So when you're looking at a note, this is a note, and it's very minimalistic, minimally viable set from a visual perspective. A note is the name, aka $name, and or its text field, aka $text. We use, as a Tinderbox community, uses the convention when referring to attributes as the $sign terminology, because that's part of the action code syntax to refer to the name of that particular attribute and the name of the text attribute. Now remember, all attributes are case sensitive. And then the other thing to remember is, and I want to emphasize this again, every note has every attribute, whether or not it's system or user generated attributes associated with it, whether or not those attributes are visible or not. So for example, if we're looking at this note, what's an attribute? And if we go, when I talk about an attribute mean visible, you'll see right now I'm showing you that this note here is visible. Now I can go edit and modify any and every attribute in Tinderbox very easily. I can either hit Command 1 and go to the quick stamp area, and if I've had displayed attributes visible here, I, for example, could go ahead and add ID and hit apply. And I've now, if you'll see here, click back, you'll now see I've now made the ID visible. And you notice that from here I've been able to edit the value of that attribute. Similarly, I can go here and I can type my string, in this area, and you'll see Tinderbox and action code. I've already got text here in the my string area of that note. I can go ahead and delete this and say, here is some new text. Okay. And you'll see I've just added some new text to that my string attribute. So you can edit attributes there, whether or not those attributes are visible or not. And if you want to see that, I can go ahead and show you that if I want to make my string visible, I can. And you'll see that I've added the value of here's my string. If I delete that text here, you'll also see that when I refresh the element, that is going to eventually get deleted as well. Then finally, you'll see I could also, if I go back into really any view within Tinderbox, I can go ahead and do the get info, and likewise I can go ahead and show you that I can actually edit the code within Tinderbox's area here too. So I can go ahead and edit any attribute through the get info area too. And I can go ahead now and delete that, for example, here. And if we go now here, you'll see that my string has disappeared from visible. So again, lots of ways to edit your attributes within Tinderbox. So every note has every attribute associated in it, whether or not that note's visible or whether or not that note has a value in it or not. Now, the next thing we want to talk about when we're understanding attributes is attributes, since they are stored value. We want to think about the types of data value, or types of data or types of value that can be stored in an attribute. You can have action data, meaning the actual script or action code that will be used to have Tinderbox execute. You can have Boolean data. This is essentially true, false, a binary choice. You can have color data. This is essentially telling Tinderbox that this particular attribute is a color, and it will have any number of different color values, a hexadecimal value, a name value, a hue, saturation value, etc. An attribute can be a date value. An attribute can be a dictionary value. You will learn more about this in Tinderbox 9 when it comes out. It can be a file value, a font value, an interval, aka time, a list, a number, a set, a string, a URL, etc. Tons of different value types that attributes can take on. And now that brings us to the next step then. So now that we understand what Tinderbox is, and we understand what a node is, and we understand what attributes are, we now can then understand action code. And essentially there are two types of code in Tinderbox, action code being one and another one being export code. This training is specifically focused on action code, but let me define both types of coding in Tinderbox right now. Action code is code that is a systematic method for interacting with and transforming Tinderbox attribute values. So for example, using action code, I can pull values, I can add values, I can multiply values, I can subtract values, I can reverse them, I can transform them. There's so many different things I can do and apply to the values within the values of attributes using action code, as opposed to export code, whereas export code is used by templates and text within Tinderbox to essentially prepare notes to be previewed in Tinderbox and or exported from Tinderbox in a whole variety of different file formats, such as text, CSV, TSV, HTML, Markdown, or even if you have applied some action code in the process, you can turn them into JSON and other related type file formats. So action code and export code are incredibly important concepts within Tinderbox. This lesson is going to be particularly focusing on making action code more understandable. So now let's jump in and think about, well, what is action code actually doing? So when we think about action code, you can perform with action code against the values of your attributes for discrete things. You can have action code what we'll call value assignments, assign a value to a particular attribute. You can have action code evaluate the value in an attribute or of an attribute. You can have action code perform operations on the values in that attribute, and you can have or one or more attributes, and you can have action code iterate or step through the values of attributes to then perform multiple operations. Another important thing to keep in mind is that action code can be strung together, or action operations and expressions can be strung together to make complex actions or activities. And we'll get to more complex ones in future lessons today. Now, so again, what is action code? Action code allows for assignments, evaluations, operations, and iterations. Now, before we give you some examples of each one of these elements, I want to then get into the next layer of understanding action code. Action code is just that. It's code. And like any code, it has a specific syntax. And what a syntax is essentially the rules that define the combination of symbols that are considered to be correctly structured statements or expressions for a particular or executing a particular task or operation. So again, that code syntax within Tinderbox action code uses a particular set of symbols or characters, such as $, curly brackets, parentheses, semicolon, a comma, a period, an equals, a double equals, brackets, and or an explanation equals, and there are others as well, but these are the primary ones you need to consider. And then the structure of how those are put together will determine a good action code syntax. And so if I highlight in this file right here, you'll see right here, for example, this is a action code structure that is pulling both these things together, both symbols and structure. So in this case, I'm doing if, comma, or parentheses, a condition, curly brackets, then do this, else, curly brackets, do that. Right, that's an example of action code, and again, we'll show you details of that in future lessons along the way. These symbols are incredibly important. So a $, for example, the $, is a reference to the value of the attribute name following the $. So for example, $ID, ID being the name of the attribute, $ID is how Tinderbox calls the ID attribute within action code. Now, $, is used also in something called regex, which we'll explain at later dates. And so therefore in regex, it's used to either call out the end of a line or to use to call out what's called a back reference. But we'll talk about that in greater detail later. Action code is also uses what we call curly brackets. These delineate the start and end point of loops, such as the cases here. We also use parentheses to be able to set off groups within action code. We use straight quotes to be able to call out strings. So in this case, we're saying here color equals, so this is an equality statement we'll refer to below, red. And so we're using two straight quotes to call out that's the string that is red, as opposed to curly quotes where it's just a visual styling which essentially breaks code. And I'll let you read this in more detail and understand that down the road. Semicolons acts as essentially a full stop. Essentially, using up this example here, I'm saying run this condition and then stop, and then do the next one, and then stop, and then do the next one. That's what a semicolon does in action code. A comma delineates different elements of an expression. We'll give you an example of that in a minute. A period is used to offset what's called operators or dot operators. For example, here I'm saying tags dot format. This period or this quote unquote dot is a way of setting off that operator. Equals are a method that are used for that. Remember, I said Tinderbox is being used for assignments. So if I go back up here, I say you can use Tinderbox for value assignments. So if we look at this, here's an example. What I'm saying is color equals red. So when essentially as an assignment function, I'm saying make the color of this note equal to red. I'm assigning the value of color red. That's what we mean when we say a value assignment. Now, the next thing I'll show you here is where we see double equals. This is where we're actually evaluating an expression. So if I go back here and you say we can also do evaluations. So in Tinderbox, there's a number of different ways to do evaluations. So for example, one way would be the double equals. And so here I'm saying, color double equals red. So I'm essentially asking a question. Is color red? Right? I'm evaluating color being red or not. So that's what the double equals means. Is color red? Whereas here, down here where I'm saying explanation point equals, this is an evaluation that's saying color not equal to red. And so there's some interesting thought processes that you can use when you're doing the evaluations. You can also use greater than, and less than, and other related type of operations for evaluations within Tinderbox. You then have brackets, which you then help you offset an array. We're going to learn more about that in v.9. And then ampersands allow you to join arguments, especially used in queries. So these are the special characters that you're using within Tinderbox that are incredibly important for you to understand to be able to effectively use action code. Now, when you're putting action code into action, how do you do that within Tinderbox? There are a number of ways that action code is used in Tinderbox. One is actions themselves. So a method for automatically triggering action code when you're, for instance, adding a note onto another note, essentially creating a container, or when you're removing a note from another note, or when an action in an agent is occurring. That's another way to do that, and we'll do that in a more advanced lesson later. But let me show you this example of an action now: the on add versus the on remove. So you'll see here I've got a note here called note 2. And if I hit the tab and I'm adding it into this note, you'll see that note 2 has become green. And you'll notice that if I hit shift tab and remove it, you'll now see that note 2 has become yellow. Well, that's happening because of the on add functions of these notes. I'm saying color equals green. So on add, make a note color green. On remove, make the color yellow. So let's do it again. I'm going to tab it in, it's now become green. I'm going to tab it out, it's now going to become yellow. That too works when you're in map view as well. If you're in map view and if you drag a note in and out of a note, you make it that you trigger that on add function. So that's what's happening there. So on add functions allow for actions, action code allows for actions, and we'll talk about that in greater detail. Action code can also be applied in what's called rules. And a rule is for automatically running action code on a specific node. And rules happen all the time. They're constantly running and take priority in the background of a Tinderbox file. Now, rules, use action code. So you write action code in the appropriate syntax that we were just explaining before in the rules dialog box of Tinderbox, and Tinderbox will be constantly running that action code. Now, let's look at rules related to edicts. You'll have another concept that you might have heard in Tinderbox. It's called an edict. And an edict's basically a rule, uses exactly the same action code as a rule, because action code is action code regardless of how it's applied. However, unlike rules, edicts run much less frequently. And in fact, they are secondary to action code, and you'll use edicts in operations that you don't require immediate attention. So when you're running a rule, because they run so often, you want those happening, as quickly as possible. Whereas with edicts, you want them happening every once in a while, and the reason why you'll have them happen less often is you want to conserve the computer processing power and the performance of your Tinderbox file. In smaller files, the distinction between a rule and an edict really doesn't matter. But in a larger file, like some of mine, where I have 8,000 or 9,000 notes, and you've got a lot of multi-layered operations going on, optimizing the processing power of your computer can actually make a pretty big difference in the performance of your Tinderbox file. So swapping between rules and edicts is an important activity that we'll learn how to do down the road. Then you have a thing called stamps. Stamps are essentially, again, everything's action, allows you to, it's all the same code, action code. But what a stamp does, it allows you to apply a one-time application of action code to a one or more selected notes. So that's what a stamp does. Link actions allows you to trigger action code when you're linking a note, particularly when you have a link type, and I will be explaining that in a future lesson as well. And then finally, action code can be actually triggered in export code. And again, something we'll share in a more advanced lesson down the road. But when you're actually using export code, you can have the export code trigger an action to transform and manipulate some notes, and then immediately put that information into the export for you to be able to have your notes previewed and or exported exactly the way you want them. So action code is one of the things that really sets Tinderbox apart from pretty much any other application I've ever used, because I'm not only able to collect my notes and then curate my notes and create my notes, but I actually can transform my notes throughout every one of those processes, even the contribution stage, leveraging and using action code. And in that process, it allows me to actually start getting more sense and making more meaning and actually creating new knowledge throughout the process. So it's, and again, in later lessons, we'll get into that in greater detail. So those are some examples of what you can do with action code in Tinderbox. And if we go ahead and look at our image here, let me go show it to you in real. You'll see here, if I click on the little action code inspector here, you'll see that I can run action code in my queries. I can run action code in my actions, in my rules. An action here is essentially on add functions. If I was looking at the on add note, I'll show you that in a minute. I can look at removes. I can run an edicts as well. So action code gets placed in these boxes here when you're wanting to run them. Action code will also get leveraged in stamps. So here's an example of action code in a stamp, as you'll see it here as well. Action code, as I already showed you earlier, can actually also be included, for example, in the on add function, which is also visible here, right? So I can look at, in this case, here is the on add function, make color green, and then on the on remove, make color yellow. So I've got the action code displayed here in the note, but as I showed you earlier in this presentation, even if that's not displayed here, and I can go ahead and remove those from the displayed attribute, you can see I'm not displaying them, but I can open up the inspector and see that action code is there and is accessible and usable. For the sake of the demo, I'll just go ahead and put those back, and on remove. Okay, so you get a sense of what action code is doing there. So that's a really important and kind of powerful thing to be thinking about when we're looking at our action code. So The other thing I wanted to share with you there is, as I noted earlier, and we'll do it in more advanced lessons. So not only can action code be accessed through the displayed attributes, it can also be accessed in templates as well as in the text fields as well, using export code. Now, when writing an action code, I just want to give you a little tip, and that if you hit the Option return key when you're writing action code, that can be a really great way to create more room in these activities. So, for instance, if I was writing action code and I said, I don't know, color equals blue, colon, and then I hit the Option key and then enter, I get a line here, and then I could say, type equals note. Okay, and you'll notice, as we talked about before, because I'm only using a single equals here, that's an assignment. So if I were to actually hit enter now to lock this action code enter into this field, essentially what I'd be doing is I'd be telling Tinderbox, assign the color blue to this note and make its attribute type equal to the word note. And so that's what that would be happening here. So using the Option key and the Enter key is a great way to get yourself some more editing space within your action code fields. Also, I often use this quite a bit. I use what's called code notes, or even like a text editor like BB Edit, when I'm working on more complex and long action code. But we'll address that in future lessons. So this gives you a sense of what action code does in action. Now, let me give you some examples of action code. So we've already demonstrated the on-add function, where if I click in or click out, I'm able to use action code to change the color of a note using the on-add functions there. Now, what you can also do and using action code is you can use stamps. So let me go and show you, for instance, here. So I'm going to use the stamp, and if you look at my action code here, I'm saying using the assignment rule, $color equals red. So when I apply this stamp to this note, you'll see here, I'm going to hit I'm going to hit apply now, and you'll see the color of this note has now become red. And then if you see here, if I say $make color blue, I can hit apply, and now I've made the color blue. So I'm assigning the color blue to that note. Now the other thing is I want to show you here. Now watch this. If I go here, go back to this note, and I go back and I make it red, take a look up here. You see where it says the Boolean attribute here that's got the check mark? If I go ahead and hit apply, that all of a sudden became red, or became checked. And because it is red, and that became checked. Well, how did that happen? Well, let's go take a look, and you'll see here we have a rule that's running. And I'm saying if the color equals to red, so this is again an evaluation going back to what we talked about before. So in this condition, I'm saying if color equals red, then again using the curly brackets, we're offsetting the method. Make is red, the Boolean attribute is red equal to true. Else, if in other words, if the color is not red, then make the Boolean attribute is red equal to false. So now if I go back here and I make the color blue, you'll now see that that gets unchecked. And because it's a rule, it happens nearly instantaneously. It's happening all the time. If I were to copy and paste this code, just going like this, and make it an edict, it too would run, but it's not going to run that often. It's going to run once all the rules have processed. And anytime you want. Now, if you want to force an edict to run immediately, you can just hit the Run Now button, and it will run immediately. And again, we can go ahead and show you to if you like. I can go ahead and make it red. You'll see it didn't, and because I don't have a lot going on in this file, you saw that it actually did happen quite fast. I can make it here blue. And then if I wanted to, I could go ahead and hit the run button. But because I don't have a lot going on in this file, the edicts themselves were running super fast, which is pretty cool. So I can go back here to my sample and just paste that back in, hit enter, and it's locked and loaded. So that's the example. Those are some very basic examples. So essentially in this one example, what we've just showed is we've shown you examples through the stamp, the use of action code as an assignment function, We've shown you through the use of a rule to use action code as an evaluation function. And we've also used action code as a form of being able to perform an operation. So essentially make this true or make this false, as well as to iterate against the two various options there. And there's more advanced ways of iteration that we'll show you at a later date. So in summary, that's action code. Action code allows you to be able to essentially, as noted, assign values, evaluate, operate, and iterate against your notes. Essentially transform your notes to create more knowledge and insight. And there's so many things you can do. You can link, you can not just change basic characteristics like shape and color. You can link notes. You can combine attributes. There's just tons and tons of things you can do. And to learn more about that until the future lessons happen, you can go to the TBX reference file, which is a resource that's been developed by Mark Anderson, a fellow Tinderboxer, the master Tinderboxer, if you will, within the community, who's been working with Tinderbox for over 16 years and has lovingly been maintaining the documentation for Tinderbox and how we do all of these really cool and exciting things that we can do within it. So you can go ahead and go look at the ATB ref and look at action code and the rules and the steps. But I'm hoping that this part 1 lesson has kind of helped you understand the core basics of action code, what it is, how it works, and the core elements of its syntax. And again, we will then iterate in future lessons to show you how to do each one of these specific operations and activities within Tinderbox, and give you examples of why you might want to do them as well. All right, well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that lesson. Oh, and before I forget, I also wanted to point out the README that I have in this Tinderbox file. So when you download the file, you'll see this README. And the reason why I'm doing this is I have images in the Tinderbox file. So for example, if you see here and I go to What's Tinderbox, you'll see I've got some references that I'm making to images. Now, the reason why I'm not embedding the images in the Tinderbox file is images, when you're in preview mode, if they're embedded, don't display. And so I'm using the absolute reference of the images on my hard drive to be able to display these images. So the path to those images is stored here in the media path attribute within my Tinderbox file. So if you want, when you essentially zip this file on your computer, as I'm explaining it here, if you're on Tinderbox 8, you're essentially going to want to unzip the file, go to this media path file, and then essentially manually type in the path for where you've saved this file on your hard drive, and then that way, and then point to the images directory in that file, and that way the images are going to be properly displayed. If you are not doing that, then what you'll want to do, or if you're on TBX9, you can actually run a stamp that I've done that will actually automatically set the path for you. Again, using action code, we can then automatically set the path. So that will be in Tinderbox 9. Once it's available, everyone will be able to do it. But for those that are currently in the backstage, that will be something that you'll be able to do as well. But I put it in this lesson to help kind of future-proof this training a little bit. Okay, thank you very much. And please don't forget to like this video as well as to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. Thanks. Bye-bye.